Liberalism is a genocidal project. The goal of liberalism is to eventually destroy all religions, and when it can't destroy religion, liberalism wants to reform all religions to make them compatible with degenerate liberal values. Liberalism does this because its goal is to maximize individual freedom and equality. But when you maximize individual freedom and equality, this comes at the expense of other important values like marriage, family, culture, and religion. So liberalism must destroy these institutions in order to maximize individual freedom and equality. Liberalism must use authoritarian and genocidal means to achieve this goal because people naturally resist. People don't want to see marriage, family, culture, and religion destroyed. So they fight back. Liberalism cracks down in a brutal way and unleashes a literal genocide and a cultural genocide to wipe away all those who oppose it. This is demonstrated through the history of colonialism. Liberal colonialism was a white supremacist project launched by Europe in the 19th century. Millions of people were killed. Millions more were violently subjugated. And those same brutal colonial policies continue till today because Muslims resist liberalization and secularization. So the West invades and occupies Muslim countries and backs brutal dictators to suppress any resistance. The liberal secular West has always seen itself as the good guy in all of this. In the colonial era, they called it the civilizing mission or the white man's burden to bring the savage brown people into the light of modern civilization. Today, liberals call it the war on terror and spreading freedom and democracy and promoting human rights in the developing world. But the underlying logic and motivation is the same: to destroy traditional cultures and religions and replace them with a liberal secular system. This is cultural genocide, and Muslims have been the biggest victims of this, especially post 9/11. Now, whether we're talking about the colonial era or the post-colonial era, liberal genocide has always enlisted the helps of the natives, specifically natives who are willing to sell out their people for a buck. There are different terms that refer to this general phenomenon of a person betraying his culture or his people. For example, the term Uncle Tom can be used, or native informant, or as Malcolm X popularized, house slave. In the Muslim world, you had these sellouts who collaborated with the genocidal colonial powers. These Uncle Toms were the most vile traitors to the Ummah, the very definition of munafiqeen. One of the main liberal reformers in British colonial India was Sir Syed Ahmad Khan. In this short opening, I cannot fully express to you what a dirty rat this munafiq was, but I can show you some of his words. For example, he wrote, "Without flattering the English, I can truly say that the natives of India, when contrasted with the English in education, manners, and uprightness, are as like them as a dirty animal is to an able and handsome man. We have no right to courteous treatment. The English have reason for believing us in India to be imbecile brutes." So he described Indian Muslims as dirty animals and brutes compared to handsome white Englishmen. He also says, "British rule in India is the most wonderful phenomenon the world has ever seen." He even says British colonialism is a gift from God. He says, "Yes, my friends, the great God above gave you the government of the East India Company." How many millions of Muslims were genocided by colonialism? Yet you have this Uncle Tom thanking God for it. Then there is this revealing quote. Sir Syed founded the Mohammedan Anglo-Oriental College, and he said that the aim of this college was to form a class of persons, Mohammedan in religion, Indian in blood and color, but English in tastes, in opinions, and in intellect. The colonial powers worked with Sir Syed to advance their genocidal project. This is a pattern we see from all liberal reformers. They work hand in hand with the feds. Now, as despicable as that Uncle Tom, Sir Syed, was, he has one huge admirer, and that's Javad Hashmi. Javad says he is closely inspired by Sir Syed. Javad even thinks of himself as a contemporary version of Sir Syed. Now, some of you might be thinking that Jafed is not a very good academic, so he probably had no clue about Sir Syed's worship of the white man. But actually, Javad defends the most racist Islamophobic views of Sir Syed. Javad is fully on board with Sir Syed's cultural genocide project, as we'll see. But the topic of today's debate is about Javad's employer, MPAC, or the Muslim Public Affairs Council. MPAC is a political advocacy org that allegedly advocates for Muslim interests. In reality, MPAC is just a bunch of Uncle Toms who serve the US government at the cost of actual Muslims. Let's go over the receipts. Right after 9/11, Salam Mariyati, president of MPAC, who backed out of debating me, by the way, went to the Bush administration to support them in the fight against, quote, radical Islam. Mariyati gave a speech to policymakers about the importance of reforming Islam in the fight against extremism. In this speech, Mariyati literally praises colonial agents and reformers like Muhammad Abdu. Like a good Uncle Tom, Mariyati boasted that at a recent MPAC conference, a speaker had said that the closest human document representing the goals of Sharia law in the US is the US Constitution. Mariyati's message back then and today has been consistent. We are the good house Muslims because we reject the non-liberal aspects of Islam. Please, white master, accept us. Please, white master, fund us. We will help you eliminate the bad Muslims. By the way, who are the bad Muslims? Bad Muslims are the radicals like Daniel, the Takfiris, who want to practice traditional Islam and not be forced to adopt liberal secularism. Over the years, MPAC has supported numerous invasions and occupations of the Muslim world. In November 2001, MPAC supported the invasion of Afghanistan and made policy recommendations on how the US can best manage the occupied country in accordance with liberal democracy. In 2003, MPAC expressed some hesitation about the invasion of Iraq, but then, a month after the invasion, which ultimately resulted in the death and displacement of millions of Iraqi Muslims, MPAC said invasion and regime change represented the will of the American people. Therefore, democratic liberalization must be delivered as quickly as possible. In 2011, MPAC cheered for NATO military action against Libya and said, quote, "These changes in the Middle East and North Africa are long overdue. They're grounded in the natural human desire to be free. We support that push toward freedom and self-determination." In 2013, MPAC urged the U.S. to take military action against Syria in order to ensure, quote, "a future for Syria that is democratic, pluralistic, and inclusive." Obviously, in all these cases, MPAC will claim that they only advocated military invasion and occupation for humanitarian reasons. So it's not fair to criticize them for their long history of war advocacy. The problem with that excuse is that literally every single war advocate claims that invasion and occupation is to help the poor people in those countries. Even the most bellicose neocons have always claimed that they only want humanitarian cause. MPAC has also supported military coups. On the day of the Egyptian coup on July 3rd, 2013, MPAC published an article celebrating the overthrow of the democratically elected president, Mohamed Morsi. The article says, quote, "We rejoice and celebrate the victory of the Egyptian people." Of course, this US-backed coup was against a democratically elected president, but since that president supported Islamic policies, MPAC was happy to call for regime change. What's funny is that after this coup proved to be deeply unpopular in the Muslim community, MPAC retroactively added a disclaimer to the top, laughably claiming that the author, quote, "in no way endorsed the military coup," end quote, when the article clearly shows that he absolutely did. This is the pattern with MPAC, as we'll see. They go back and rewrite the past in an effort to whitewash their long history of betraying the Muslim community. MPAC also has a history of aligning with Zionist organizations and interests. Obviously, MPAC has made many statements over the years against Israel. MPAC has to express this opposition to Israel because the American Muslim community would completely reject MPAC if it showed any kind of sustained allegiance to Israel. But when we look past the facade, we see MPAC's true colors. A telling example is MPAC president writing in the Huffington Post in 2015 defending the Muslim Leadership Initiative, or MLI. MLI is a Zionist organization that takes American Muslims on all expenses paid tour of Israel in order to butter them up to Zionism. In 2015, American Muslims almost unanimously condemned these sellout Uncle Toms for their betrayal of the Palestinian people. Boycotts were called to censure anyone even remotely associated with the Zionist infiltration. At this very sensitive and crucial moment, what does MPAC do? Well, Mariotti writes an op-ed telling Muslims to stop these boycotts. Don't be so harsh on MLI. They have good intentions. A more recent example of MPAC's alignment with elements of Zionist policy is their statement in support of the Biden administration's, quote, "U.S. national strategy to counter anti-Semitism." Palestinian groups have condemned this Biden initiative because it conflates criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism. The White House says, quote, "The strategy reaffirms the United States' unshakable commitment to the state of Israel's right to exist, its legitimacy, and its security, and makes clear that when Israel is singled out because of anti-Jewish hatred, that is anti-Semitism." Many Zionist groups have applauded this new initiative, while Palestinian activists have blasted it. MPAC, of course, sides with the Zionists. Now let's discuss MPAC's support for CVE, countering violent extremism. Like good Uncle Toms, MPAC has worked closely with the FBI and Department of Homeland Security to implement CVE policies against Muslims. CVE was developed in Europe and the US but was exported internationally via UN Security Council Resolution 2178. What you may not realize is that CVE is the program used by the secret police in Arab countries, the Chinese to target Uyghurs, the BJP to target Indian Muslims, and Israel to target Palestinians. Many human rights groups have noted that CVE is an Islamophobic weapon to attack and cripple Muslims. Basically, CVE is a continuation of cultural genocide of Muslims from the colonial era. If you grow a beard, wear a hijab, or if you have beliefs that are contrary to liberalization, then you're branded a radical and potential terrorist, and the government is justified in surveilling you, restricting your travel, detaining you, or even assassinating you. It doesn't matter if you have never committed a crime or you've never even threatened to commit a crime, let alone actual terrorism. The mere fact that you hold illiberal beliefs means that you are a threat. This is exactly the reasoning that is now being used to put conservative Christians on terror watch lists because they protest at school board meetings or abortion clinics. MPAC has a long history supporting CVE or CVE adjacent initiatives. For example, in 2006, Mariotti pleaded for the FBI to fund his counter-radicalization program. He also outrageously said that every Islamic school should be scrutinized to make sure they're not teaching any kind of radicalism. From 2014 to 2016, MPAC collaborated with Obama's Department of Homeland Security to launch their own CVE initiative called Safe Spaces. For their trouble, MPAC was awarded around $400,000 by the feds. Several high-ranking MPAC employees like Harris Terran and Alejandro Buto were also rewarded for their work on CVE with cushy governmental positions. The Safe Spaces initiative claimed that Muslims who emphasize certain verses of the Quran or certain hadith of the Prophet ﷺ were potentially violent, and there needs to be an intervention with community authorities to neutralize such individuals. If a young Muslim, for example, talks a lot about classical Islamic scholars like Ibn Taymiyyah or Ibn al-Qayyim, that is another red flag for potential terrorism. So MPAC contributed to government efforts to thought police and surveil the Muslim community. Again, this is what Uncle Toms have been doing against Muslims since the colonial era. Over the years, MPAC was so thoroughly shamed for their involvement with CVE, they were forced to issue an apology, essentially an admission of guilt. Of course, the apology engaged in gaslighting the community and misrepresenting the nature of their vile CVE involvement. The admission of guilt was especially dishonest because MPAC has continued to work with the federal government since then. The person who has benefited the most from selling out the Muslim community is Mariotti. The man has had a working relationship with the Bush admin, the Obama admin, the Biden admin, and even the Trump admin. In September 2022, Mariotti was appointed to the DHS Faith-Based Security Advisory Council. The council includes hardcore Zionists, Hindutva-aligned Indians tied to RSS, and career shills and CVE veterans like Mariotti. The uber-Zionist Muslim-Jewish Advisory Council immediately celebrates the appointment of pro-Zionist CVE shills like Mohammed Majid and Talib Sharif to the council along with Mariotti. A major purpose of the council is information sharing between essentially Uncle Tom's and the federal government. So this is ultimately a continuation of CVE type work from MPAC. Another notable thing about MPAC is that they're literally endorsed by RAND. RAND is the official think tank of the US military, and it's infamous for its work in the war on terror against Muslims. In their report promoting online voices for countering violent extremism, RAND mentions MPAC by name as one of the organizations in line with CVE policy. By the way, RAND also mentions sellout imams like Sohaib Webb, but more on that another day. So this is Javad's organization. All this dirt is just the tip of the iceberg. The reality is Javad fits in perfectly with these Uncle Toms. Jay started his role at MPAC in October 2022, but
30 seconds left.
this was shortly after Mariotti's Security Council appointment. What makes Javad more malicious than the average Uncle Tom is that he constantly makes false accusations against conservative Muslims of being affiliated with ISIS or other terror groups in order to get them in trouble with the feds, not to mention his doxing. For example, he has accused me of being one step away from suicide bombing. He has similarly attacked other Muslim figures online. When confronted, he just laughs and says, oh, this is nothing. Ultimately, Javad is like his employers and his idol, Sir Sayed. He's a disgusting sellout Uncle Tom rat and a Mortad who worships the white man like his liberal reformist colonial predecessors.